Sorry about
We have
that.
104 people in this room. And once again, I would like to remind you of our meeting guidelines where you're going to remain muted. And if you have questions, you're going to put them into that chat. And then our chat moderator, who is Vesper, she's here somewhere, will be monitoring the chat. And we'll be having some time for a Q&A as well. So if we could go ahead and spotlight, Sandor, our two panelists.
So, Peter, we don't have spotlight in these breakout rooms, but they should be pinned. And I think I checked in chat. Everyone can see Queen Badass and Theos and you right now.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Right. Okay. Let me just get that out. All right. So I'd like to start with, we've got our two panelists, and so thank you so much for being here. And I'd like both of you just to give a short introduction, once again, to who you are, who your camp is, and maybe some of the guiding philosophies that you have around your camp. And you can duke it out for who wants to go first.
Let's see. I want to be able to see Mika.
I know, I'm same. Let me see.
There we go.
All
Mika,
right.
I'm happy if you'd like to begin.
Take it away, religious as fuck.
Okay. Thank you for having me. I was very excited to be part of this discussion because I enjoy being part of leadership. For me, Religious as Fuck is a smaller camp. We had about 18 last year. Our philosophy is a lot more hands-on, person to person, because our camp size is small, but also because our content of our camp, our programming, really does lean toward a specific niche. If you have any type of affiliation with organized religion in the Western world, it has a little bit of connotation where we do like to be tongue-in-cheek. It is religious as fuck, and we like to use the word fuck because it lets people know that we are all inclusive. We are specifically Christian programming, and I like to say that because a lot of people ask, kind of right off the bat, is this a joke? And it's a both and answer. A lot of us have been wounded by a church in some way, and we open that up also for discussion. And we also have a lot of folks that work maybe for a church or have in the past. And if you've ever been an employee and had a view of your boss or your higher ups, maybe it's not all positive. And so I like to let people know that we're also a lot of queer burners, because that is another way a lot of folks are wounded by the church in some way because of their sexual orientation. And so we started in 2018. Puppy, Brian Baker, is an Episcopal priest. He's retired now. And I heard him on Burner Podcast say, if anyone's interested in helping me start a theme camp around Christian programming, reach out to me. And I reached out to him and said, I am part of a huge camp right now, and I have a Catholic background, and I would love to actually bring that to the playa with not only but with the option of saying, I am so much more than that as well. And so what we like to also remind people is that we're burners first. Everybody that's part of Religious as Fuck, even the burners or even the virgins, have some type of pull to Burning Man first, as well as their religious affiliation. But we also have a lot of non-religious folks. For example, we have a married couple. One is a Baptist minister, and her husband identifies as not religious at all. And I love having folks come and identify with whatever they're comfortable with, because I feel like they really bring that to our camp. We're able to be small because a lot of our recruitment is word of mouth. We aren't really this loud type of group until you get to know us. But our recruiting is a lot more kind of person to person. So what we do is when someone's interested in being part of our camp, we have what's called a camp care committee. We have about 5 different committees where folks are able to be part of a committee right at the beginning. So even if they haven't committed to the camp quite yet, we ask, if you are going to be camping with us this year, here are the committees, what really speaks to you. So for example, build, kitchen, strike, programming, what's called the transition team, kind of in between build and starting the week. And so for example, we have a lot of religious affiliated priests that might say, put me on the programming committee, I know how to run a Eucharist. And we might have someone go, I'm not religious at all, put me on the camp kitchen committee. And that allows them to have a lead that's directly in contact with them. So we have a leadership team of about 5 to 6 people. They all head one committee, and then that committee really takes care of those campers. So for example, I was the kitchen lead, and we might have a new virgin burner. And what I would do is sit down, over Zoom, in person, over phone call. So that way they have a personal connection right away. And that's not always available at larger camps. I mean, rightly so, but we're able to do that because we decided that was part of our mission to stay small. And for the most part, if we, for example, had a huge influx of people come in, we might have a larger leadership team. We might ask, campers to be a little bit more of mentors. Hey, Annie's part of the kitchen lead. She needs help vetting new campers. And that really is part of our leadership approach, because a lot of times with somebody that has been wounded by the church or that is known well in their community as a church member, it's a very personal conversation, or it can be at times, especially when you're talking about trauma or anything to do with mental and physical health that has been jeopardized in the past due to a religious affiliation. And so that allows people to feel that safety and that confidentiality. Now, as we grow as a camp, we have been getting a lot of questions where we, hear, well, do you have any type of negative feedback that you get? Yes, we do. And that's another reason why we really like to make sure we have all types of genders on our leadership team, and religious and non-religious. So that way we have a lot of voices that are making the decisions. We don't like to make decisions in a vacuum. And we have what's called our leadership call every month. And then during COVID, we actually opened that up to have a Zoom camp call. So during COVID, we were still able to carry out a lot of our programming, but also with the leadership team, secession comes up a lot. So maybe you want to bring in someone that is interested because you want to see them in your role. And I hear that a lot. How do you, deal with secession planning? So I'm happy to answer those questions. But for the most part, just giving that general overview, smaller camp, being able to be on a committee right away lets us have those one-on-one conversations. And also when we're vetting folks, we like to have at least 2 different people that are of different genders, different religious affiliations. So that way someone new coming in has that option of being able to ask those questions in a safe environment. So with that, I will hand it over to Mika.
Well, first, thank you, Entheos. And if anyone's just joining, this is the small camp breakout room. We've got 2 presenters, and we're going to hear from our panelists. We're going to hear from our second panelist now. So go for it, Mika.
Hi, so I am Mika. I got my playa name this year, Queen Badass, probably because I was foolish enough to start a camp my virgin year. And let's see, what is the camp about? We came together because when I was out there looking for camps to become a part of, I didn't find the one that quite fit the position that I was in. I also had an experience where I got to see a leadership style that I did not necessarily like. So what I decided was, instead of just working it out and being a part of it, why don't we build the camp that we want to see? And in building that camp, we decided to come up with a number of individuals. So we're a group of individuals in small groups who wanted to come together and create community. We wanted to create the same space, particularly for people that look like me out there. I was really happy to be a part of the the MPOC neighborhood this year, which was really great. And one of the challenges that I really looked into was, how do we go as new burners in this new environment, in this new space, and figure out how to lead a camp, how to explore ourselves and the things we want to do, but also do it in a place where we felt safe and comfortable to do so. So Mo Better Burners came out of that. And we really look at ourselves as an incubator. So we can come in, learn how to build a camp, grow a camp, and do so comfortably, where we can learn, be okay to fail, and support our neighborhood. We really wanted to be a home within a home, right? So we're all at home in Black Rock City, but we wanted to be the safe space and create this home within a home on Playa. And that's what we did. In 2022, we were 24 campers. 2/3 were also virgins. And a lot of what I received, a lot of the feedback I received in 2022 when I came up with this idea to start a camp was not discouraging, but it wasn't as like, yay, go for it. It was like, why don't you wait? Why don't you wait? Why don't you wait? I think a lot of that is also what fueled Camp Mo Better and saying, nope, we don't have to wait. Why wait? Let's do it. Let's find like-minded people who are strong doers, positive, want to build a great community and a great neighborhood, come together and create a camp that we all want to be a part of. The camp leadership style for 2022, we had a core four, and the core four was a leadership team that we brought together, recognizing that we all have different strengths. So what are the strengths that we have that naturally rise to the top, so we can create a good space? So I would say my personal leadership style in that core four was leaning towards the probably a combination between transformative leadership style and a visionary leadership style, somewhere in between those two. And then pulling in, recognizing my strengths, but also my weaknesses, pulling in 3 other individuals as co-leads, and we all led together. We had Kirk, who was really had the attention to detail and focus, who was also a virgin burner. Scout, who was who was one of our pros, and she not only had the historical knowledge and experience of being a burner, but also creating a camp. She also had a great temperament and could have, certain conversations and deliver messages in a better way. And then finally, on that core 4 leadership team, we had Nova, who was also a veteran burner. And she was amazing in so many ways, but especially with creating the kitchen for us. So no one starved out on Playa, which was something that I knew nothing about whatsoever going into it. And so together, the 4 of us really, worked hard, used all of our skills to create a camp that we all were very, very proud of. A beautiful thing happened as well with the other campmates who came about was, even though we didn't have particular positions or focuses outside of that core 4 going in, yes, rookie mistake, won't let that happen again. But this beautiful thing happened where we had a lot of campmates, or quite a few, that rose to the top that we didn't expect. So we had this great leadership team that formed that we didn't plan for. And you could quickly and easily see who wanted it, who could do it. And I was really excited that the majority of many of those virgin burners were that leadership that rose to the top. I have more to share, but I will just wait and let some of the questions come in, and then we'll see if we get them answered.
Well, the thing that I'm hearing too is just this distribution, or this delegation of of camp duties, which can be very important, kind of, again, depending on your leadership style. By the way, I see a hand raised. What you can do is you can put your question in the chat. So the person who's raised their hand, we're not going to be taking live questions. Please put your question in the chat and we will address that question when we get to the Q&A at the end part of this. So this delegation of having people find what they love as to lead different teams. Queen Badass, I wanted to ask you, as a brand new camp this year, where were you able to find some of the resources that you needed to get your camp off of the ground? Because I know that you did quite a bit of research on that.
Great question. And first, the greatest resource that we had at Camp Mobetta, and I'm sure all the camps, is our people. And when I look at the people, and going back to that core 4 leadership team that we talked about, or that I mentioned before, those folks naturally rose to the top because I would see them regularly in all of the meetings throughout the different areas. So we were participating in the MPOC neighborhood meetings and Hive meetings, right? And other meetings and other groups throughout that are available to us, right? And when you start seeing the same faces come in there from early on in the year, the same faces started showing up, which was the first indication to me that these folks were just as interested, as focused as I was. And when you listen to the things that they shared or their comments and questions, it was something that was really, they really stood out. And so I wanted to check those resources first and ask them hey, oh my gosh, I see you in all these. Are you open to, taking a chance or taking a leadership role? So again, it was that watching those folks based on their experiences and who they are naturally and who rose to the top to do that. And I was really fortunate that that they, took a chance at a first timer as well. And we had this space where we could all learn together, grow together, fail together, but also trust each other in that. The other resources that I got was everywhere. So Hive became a really good resource early on for me, and lots of the different Facebook groups. There are so many out there, and finding the ones with really good, consistent information that wasn't just all the snark that I had to get used to, was good and out there. And once you see certain people who are posting often or commenting often, I found when I was reaching out to them directly for additional questions or additional feedback, they were really supportive. I was really fortunate to find a few folks early on who were very open to sharing. So when you find different camp leaders or just individuals with the experience you want to share, it's always a great thing. Thank you so much, and shout out to Mark Duncan of Soundgarden, who gave lots of time and hours out there and lots of resources. There were so many. There's Yulin, who is a art car and has been going to the Burn for many years. He was a great resource for me. And if I couldn't find it myself online, going to these folks, and there's so many more I could name, but going to folks like this was really helpful to get us there. You go to Mark Duncan, and I just asked for, an example of where to get shade from. And he responded not just with, here's a resource to look for shade, but here's how much shade, and had drawn diagrams of how much shade we would need for how many people and such. So there's really great burners out there, and people that became the greatest resource.
Yeah, humans are our greatest resource for sure. One of the questions that came up in the chat that I wanted to just ask you, as well, is about this leadership style. Like, what does that mean? What is a leadership style? And I think it's an important thing to think about when you are a camp lead. And I'm not sure, was it Entheos or was it Mika who talked about what type of leadership style? I don't remember which one of you mentioned it. Entheos? Yeah. Do you want to just talk about, for you, when you talked about your leadership style, what that means to you?
Yes, I don't think I actually mentioned it on our breakout. So I would say for me, it's servant leadership. Mika was mentioning transformational as well as visionary, but I'll let her also speak to those. I was really bringing in my leadership style from my professional world because I've led a lot of volunteer teams. I've also worked in nonprofits for over 15 years. And a lot of my leadership style is what's called servant leadership. So leading by example. And a lot of times what that means is seeing those that are on my committee that could replace me. So again, that succession planning, really letting them know, hey, this is something I see in you. And also letting people know why I'm doing what I'm doing when I'm doing it. I think that's really integral to having that leadership style of leading by example. And that's just something that stands out for me because I feel like it lets people really see, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to see me as an equal. And it's okay to come to me in confidence when you don't think things are going right. And I think that's a big part of it is who do we get in charge, or, who do we get in contact with when we don't think things are going well? Because a lot of times it isn't that person, quote unquote, in charge that gets a lot of that feedback. It might be those folks right underneath them. And so that's why I like to say that that's my type of leadership style. Specifically for the burn, so that way people feel that they can come to me and it's an open door kind of policy.
And I think it's important to think about your leadership style because some leadership styles might work better in different types of situations. So this is what, when we were having our conversations leading up to this campfire talk, this came up of like, as a lead, you may consider just looking it up on, on the internet, different leadership styles and where do you fit in and different types of leadership styles that are maybe more suited to different types of situations. So Mika, did you want to add anything to that?
I will, actually, two things there. So when I looked up leadership styles in preparation for this conversation, I thought it was interesting that the style that I thought I had, like I mentioned, was different than when I took the test and looked at that. What I also recognize is that leadership style on playa and off playa can be very different. And I think that's something that I didn't fully take into account, right? Some of our strengths and weaknesses when we come to a place of leadership and where we should, lean heavily on one or the other in support of each other when we're out there. And that definitely another one of those, lessons learned for from 2022. As far as leadership styles, when you look up a visionary leadership style, the words that come up and that they talk about are bold, optimistic, innovative, magnetic, strategic, risk taker, inspirational. That was not what I thought. I thought my leadership style was transformative, which is defining the collective vision and shared mission, uniting people together through common cause, having emotional intelligence, and lead with influence, and kind of a cultural team. And so it was interesting that visionary came up when I took one of the leadership styles tests, but transformative is who I would describe myself as. I'd really be curious after this to check with the rest of my campmates and see what they would define that leadership style as. But it's definitely something that I want to do and take very seriously for myself, as well as other folks that we bring in as campmates in 2023 and beyond. So it's all of us recognizing what our leadership style is, where our strengths and weaknesses are, so we can better support each other on and off playa.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And again, we're spending a bit of time on this concept of leadership style because we've come up, we believe that this is actually something that's quite important to think about. The next thing I wanted to ask is kind of wrangling the cats now with a smaller camp. Sometimes you have fewer people in the camp. One might think it's kind of easier, but then if you don't have as many people and you don't have people perhaps fulfilling the expectations that you hoped that they would have for strike, for build, which is often a common experience for camps. Can you address, how do you motivate, how do you engage? And I think this does kind of tie into the leadership style or how you approach your camp, but how do you motivate your campmates, inspire your campmates to participate through the whole week?
Mika, do you want to
go?
for, okay.
Take it over.
One of the things that we talk about a lot is really preparation prior to coming to Playa. And depending on the schedules, we understand people can't make it through the week. So what we try and do is really lay out who's coming in when, who's leaving when, and the people that it might be coming in midweek, could they stay to the strike? And we also have people that are coming, midweek for that idea where they're not coming for build. So that way their energy stays and comes through strike. So for example, I stayed from build through strike. And so there were a few people like that we knew beforehand that was going to be our role. However, that's a lot of times where our committees come in. So for example, with the build committee, we had one person in charge of the dome, and they held the instructions for the dome, and they were the lead to build the dome. We then, we then had people specifically doing the shade structure for the dorms. We broke it up too with the build committee gave a schedule of what we were doing on what day. So for example, we had someone drive in the truck with us on Wednesday, and then they left. So they were coming back to return later in the week, knowing that they were coming in for strike. Also things like expectations. Here are the built-in times that we need you. Here are the built-in breaks. So for example, during the hottest part of the day, we made sure we were breaking at 1:30, come back at 5 o'clock. What we expect you to do during that time is rest, rehydrate, take a bike ride, go enjoy the playa, so that way you're not burnt out when it does get cooler out. Also things like kitchen committee. What we had was folks that offered to cook for us during the week, and we had those dinners planned. Here's the meals that are planned. Here's the meals that are not planned that are on you. And a lot of it came down to what the committee leads do. We also switch those every year. So for example, the kitchen committee, the build committee, the strike committee, the programming committee, we ask those leads to then switch hats. So for example, you're not burnt out being the same one every year on programming, but it's also not any fault of yours that you are no longer the leader for that. We want a different flavor. We want new energy. For example, we added the frontage. It's a little bit different than the inside of the dome. So you have the inside of the dome space versus what does the outside space look like. And that allows us to get new energy in without there being any type of personal offense taken, where they know that that's just 1 year that they're going to be leading that. And also, I think a lot of it comes down to be there with your campers. Here's a job. Okay, I'm going to go away now. That doesn't usually work very well. I would say really, yes, you are the leader. Yes, you are the person in charge, and you may need to go and, be part of other things, but that's really where we have their leadership teams splitting up and staying with their committees, because a lot of times it's, oh, I left to go do such and such and I came back and the job wasn't done. I wouldn't be so much worried if the job wasn't done. I would be more worried why that you left. And so really looking at those leaders to put in that same time with the project they've asked to be lead on.
Thank you.
This is one of those areas where being a first-time camp lead, when you talk about lessons learned, some of the big lessons learned. As I mentioned, we had a camp of 24 individuals, and With 24, the camp of 24, being that small, there's really no room to, hide. So everyone and their, contribution to camp and efforts are seen. And because we really started off with 24 that we met online and cultivated and curated, or so we thought, perfectly, there still sometimes ends up being some areas where we can improve. So I would call one of my failures as a camp lead in 2022 was having what we called all hands on deck for build and strike. So we thought that if everybody would come in together, we all could share and bear that burden together to reduce it so it wasn't one focus on one person, it was shared by all. Definitely won't do that again. We'll lessons learned from others, and that we will change that approach going forward. And there definitely will be leads for the different areas. But some beautiful things happened with the camp doing it that way. You saw some people naturally rise to the top and take lead in roles that weren't theirs, but took that role on for the year. So we're going to look to those who were doing that naturally, reach out to them if they still want to continue that, and set up those specific roles and structures with responsibilities for 2020, for 2023 and beyond. I definitely do not recommend all hands on deck. There will be a lead, a build team with a sub build team, and then a strike team lead with a sub strike team, and they will not be the same going forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of it sounds like, the expectations. And I know for me as a camp lead as well, we have very clear expectations. And I think sometimes with a smaller camp, like you say, people can't hide as well. So when you have a larger camp and maybe 3 or 4 people are gone from strike, you might not notice if you've got, 50, 60 people. But I feel like what I'm hearing from both of you is that having these very clear expectations for your campmates, and, again, understanding that it's an evolving process. So Queen Badass, you're saying, gosh, we're going to learn for next year. And I know that for our camp, which has been going for about 12 years, is that, we're always evolving. We're always evolving. And so, it's like, give yourself kind of some credit for the need to be reevaluating, but just remember to have a good time and have fun. I think that's also just a really important thing.
Definitely. And if I may add there, one of the things that I tried to do very early on with anyone who joined camp was being very clear, though, first time camp, I'm going to get it wrong. And hopefully you give me the grace to get it wrong. And even though I'm going to work hard to try to get it right. And in the same token, you can come here and learn and figure it out too, where if we all lead with, love and positivity, but give each other the grace when we get it wrong, that don't worry, next year and for years to come, we will all work on it and get better year over year.
That's right. Such an important part of what we do. Now, of course, Queen Badass, you haven't had the chance to think about succession and leadership, but Entheos, have you thought about that? Because that's another big question. I know it's come up in the chat already, but it's another big question. How do you pass that leadership baton year to year or every couple of years? Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yes, we have what's called our opening dinner meeting. So on the Monday of the event, once the gates open and our campers are coming in, we have a 6 p.m. dinner / social / event outing. And so what we do with that is we lay out, here's your leaders that you can come to when things aren't good, when you're not doing well. There will be a time you have a drop during this week. Please anticipate that. Here's some food and get your lights ready. We're all going to go out together. And so within that kind of opening circle, dinner, meet and greet, we also say, here's your leadership team for this year. If you see in yourself things that you could do it a better way, you could improve in some, aspect of this camp, we want to hear from you. Also, we lay out goals where we look at each other. There's a lot of just white people in our camp. We want to see that change, and we're vocal about that. So it's not just diversity with queer, non-religious, religious, but we're also a camp of older folks. So I'm 40, I'm one of the younger ones, and we want to make that something where it's not an obstacle or barrier to coming to our camp. Because a lot of times I'll hear, oh, that's for those young people. They have a great time out in the desert. No, most of our camp is over 60 and they rock it. And so we do have that diversity where if they want to see their ideas come to fruition, be part of our leadership team. And so we try and keep it to 5. And then if you're interested in not being part of leadership, but you want to run a committee, that's a great way to also be part of the leadership team, but you don't have to engage in the monthly calls. So we tell the campers right up front. Also, if prior to going to the playa, even if they're a virgin burner, we say, if you're interested in leadership, please let us know. And if there are barriers, for example, like they have kids, they have a full-time job, they can't commit to being a leader, but again, they can be the lead of just that committee, that's also an option. Camp Care is one of our committees, and that's kind of like what we jokingly call them, like the yearbook committee. So they want to know who each one of the campers are, so that way they can introduce people in kind of our monthly, we also use MailChimp as a great means of communication. So not just one-on-one from your camp committee lead, but we also open it up and say, when we're kind of doing a breakdown, we have an after camp off playa call where someone will actually give you a call to talk one-on-one. It's not just an open Zoom call. So that way, for example, we had a camp leader that did not go to playa this year. So he had no qualms about hearing how bad it went, how dusty it was, how much it sucked to work with so-and-so. And so people felt very open telling them feedback because they didn't feel like they were hurting their feelings. So I really encourage those kind of one-on-one calls. And then that person brought that feedback to our larger group discussion and said, wow, strike must have been really hard this year because we got a lot of negative feedback for that. Okay. And you don't go to the strike team and necessarily say, this is all on you. How can we make it better? Getting to the point of strike before it gets, this and this that were talked about on the call. I really encourage those one-on-ones because it lets people feel heard, but also you hear real feedback. A lot of times on a group Zoom call, you get a lot of great, grand, wonderful, and then kind of sweeps under the rug of things that didn't work. The things that didn't work make the camp stronger. And we try and reiterate that at that Monday night meeting, but also to let people know you don't always have to be part of leadership. If you're part of leadership this year, you don't have to do it the next year. And kind of having that call of saying, if you're interested in coming back, let's commit to it. And usually we do that in November, December. And then we have that statement of intent coming in from a camp in January, but it lets people kind of off the hook. Even if they were an exceptional leader, that doesn't mean that they necessarily want to keep doing that same thing over and over and get burnt out on it. And that's also why we have kind of the mandatory switching hats. So for example, okay, the chapel looked awful this year. It wasn't just on Hannah, it was on Hannah, and this whole team. Great, let's put someone in that different place so that way they feel like they've been heard. I also specifically look at gender roles. I don't want to see a leadership team that all looks the same. And I'm very vocal about that as one of the camp founding members. But also, for example, people might not know that unless we say that. I say that a lot of times too. You don't know what you don't know. So it might be that they're a great leader and they don't hear on Monday night, wow, we want you part of leadership team. They won't throw their hat in the ring for next year.
Awesome. Thank you. So again, communication, clear expectations, listening to people, giving people an opportunity to voice. what they're thinking and their experiences. I want to open it up. We have about 10 minutes before we go back to our grand room, believe it or not. And I wanted to open it up to some of the questions that have come up in the chat. Vesper, do you have some questions that you might be able to ask from?
I sure do. Yeah. I think an easy one to start with maybe do your camps have dues? And if so, do you mind if we ask how much and how you manage that?
I'll jump in there first on that one. Camp Mobetta operated on what we called equitable resource sharing dues. And it was equitable because it wasn't one flat number for everyone. That ranged from $150 for some up to $400 for that. And that equitable camp share was based on your income. So those who made more paid more. So it was an equal share for everybody at camp. I can say that that was successful for the most part. We'll continue to look at something like that for next year with some adjustments, right? As always, you're learning lessons and we're going to make some adjustments there. But it was effective and we thought, like I said, not just fair, but equitable option.
Excellent.
Similarly, we have between 150 and 300 on a sliding scale that we ask our campers. And we also ask people that aren't specifically camping with us, but that are part of the bigger community. So for example, before we started the camp in 2018, they had a Facebook group called Episcopalians at Burning Man. And so we have a lot of people that are, for example, Miss Bunny, who's a ranger, she camps with Poly Paradise, but she's part of our Eucharist every time. And so she really likes the idea of, helping our camp and supporting our camp by paying dues, but she doesn't camp with us. We also open it up to folks that are just interested in our programming, that, are interested in our mission, that aren't burners. So for example, we use our MailChimp. Anybody that's ever been interested, anybody that's, found us online, we ask for donations that way. We have also done in the past where we've had priests that are in seminary that qualify as students that can go after some grant funding. So if you have any type of affiliation as a student, military, through your job, a matching program, we aren't a 501c3 at all, but because of their status as a student, they were able to qualify for that funding. And that, they also paid camp dues or maybe in lieu of that. Also, if they, for example, aren't able to pay anything, are they also able to help in other ways? So it's not a hard no if you can't pay dues, or if a sponsor. So we have actually, I would say at least 10 people this year in 2022 that helped pay for camp dues that were not campers with us. They, can't make it for 2022. They can't wait to see us next year. And for example, me as a camper, I've also paid dues at other camps that I'm not camping with that I really appreciate and support their mission. So for example, there's a big Jewish camp called Milk and Honey. Brian used to be part of a camp called Perky Parts, and really kind of having these crossovers of helping each other out as camps, if you can monetarily. But again, that's an ask before Playa, usually with our email, Facebook, something that's early enough in the year that's asking for money and saying, here's our upcoming camp. We have about 18. 5 of those people are, students that really are not able to pay income. They're all coming to stay for strike, for example. Is there any way that we can help sponsor them?
Fantastic. Very great information. I love that cross camp stuff. That's really, really cool. Vesper.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about how you guys set expectations for your campmates. Several questions came up about what do you do when people do not fulfill expectations or are not getting things done as would be expected for their job? How do you start that conversation with them or with other camp leads? And is that different whether the person who's not fulfilling expectations is a regular camper or is part of the leadership?
I will jump in there then. So that happened. That's always interesting. The good part is that for some of those conversations with individuals, it was just making them aware of it. There were some that didn't even realize that, it wasn't happening and absolutely jumped back in, stepped back up. We're happy to, be acknowledged and, do their part. And a few times when it was not successful, there's really nothing, you can do when you're out there on playa. It was you usually don't have a lot of time to dwell on it. So it was acknowledged, right? Acknowledged, I see it. And individuals will not either be invited back, to camp with us for that reason.
Antheus?
Fortunately, there was no leadership that happened with. So that was good.
I've definitely seen it with leadership as well. And we actually, again, we post when folks sign up for their shifts. So that way other people can see who's going to be there or who's not going to be there. And kind of the why behind it too, is someone sick? Is someone, not feeling like their weight in other ways as well, not just this particular shift. It does fall under our camp care committee. Again, that kind of admin, if you will, but that particular lead for that committee is also supported by the other leadership team. And it usually is handled by the person who vetted them into the camp. So for example, we had someone that didn't show up to one of our talks called Jesus and Psychedelics. They were having a really hard time with the heat. So they were, people knew where they were not doing well. They were not at their scheduled shift. However, letting them know, hey, we need other help in this area. Would you be able to do this when you're feeling well? And we've had in the past, people vetted prior to Playa and they were asked not to join our camp, because we felt like their intentions were that of malice, for example, where they had a lot of unhealed things in their nature that we felt like they would be a predator coming to Burning Man. Mm-hmm. And so even before coming to Playa, again, kind of vetting those people of their intention. Do you want to be part of camp? Here's what it means to live in community. What's your intention that you're bringing to Burning Man to either add to our camp or not in that case? But again, it falls on that leadership to make it public, to let people know, like Queen Badass said, it's important to say, I see you, I recognize you, because other people are going to also feel that, well, then I can act just like that and there's no consequences. And that can be a spiral as well.
And I'll just add, as a camp lead, we've just got another couple minutes before we're going to go back to the main breakout room where we will have some more opportunities to hear some questions and answers. But what we do in our camp, we do a lot of what you're talking about. But when it's just someone who's like, oh my God, I just forgot. And, gosh, yeah, I just was having so much fun. We do actually something kind of fun. We have a leather slapper that has our camp name on it, or it has the word slut on it. And we have this, we slap everybody in our camp. It's kind of something that we do for fun and, with full consent, of course. But if someone consents to it, we say, okay, you messed up. So now you got to get on the table, pull your pants down, and we're going to slap you. You have a choice. Is it going to be fa-fa or is it going to be slut? And then it kind of lightens it up as well, too, because sometimes there are those times where you just want to say, hey, we know it's hard and, you've done everything else, but today you might have messed up. And, again, if it's lighthearted and they're not having some kind of crisis or, that works actually quite well. So we're just down to a minute before we're going to be going back to the main breakout room. I do hope that you'll join us in the main breakout room. There's a couple more things that we're going to be talking about. We do have a Camp Network feedback form. Vesper, if you could put that in the chat, and I believe we're going to be okay, I believe we're going to be kicked out of this room here when Puppy closes the breakout. I want to say thank you to everyone for participating in this room. I know we didn't get to all of your questions. We're really hoping to do a leadership, another leadership campfire talk or at the camp symposium. So, and again, please stick around and come back to the main room. I'm hoping that we're going to get kicked out of it. This whole breakout thing is kind of new for us for campfire talks. So we're working a bit with the technology, and everyone closing breakout rooms now. All right.